Alright guys, as promised from the community poll, I shall do the very much requested installing as much Windows versions as I can on my computer. Now I will put a disclaimer first, I cannot install most of these on my actual computer, which is why I have a virtual machine. Then again, it's still going to take a very long time because of how annoying these versions are to install nowadays. Now over time I have installed quite a lot of virtual machine images and virtual disks because I just like installing different versions of Windows on my computer. So here they all are, and we're going to be using most of these today. Now of course I will be installing the very first Windows version first, Windows 1. Now Windows 1, 2 and 3 are all MS-DOS executives. I don't currently have Windows 3, but I do have Windows 1 and 2 and I will be installing those. Now since they're MS-DOS executives, they're not exactly their entire version. They are just like kind of an extension of the most famous Microsoft product at the time, MS-DOS. But Windows 3.1 was kind of a step forward to making a actual operating system, because they fully fleshed out the GUI, and with Windows 98 they kind of stepped away from MS-DOS but still built the version of Windows off MS-DOS, and the last ever version built off MS-DOS/9X was Windows Me, the one we all know and hate, and I will be installing it and I will hate it because for some reason Windows Me is the most painful installation out of all of these. I wonder why. So here we are in the very final parts of the Windows installation. Now here we are in Windows, not really much to do around here. For some reason it won't let me open most of the apps, but I believe in the next version of Windows I'm installing, Windows 2, there are some that do work, hopefully. Now Windows 2 is actually not very different from Windows 1. The only real difference I actually saw was the color changes when I first looked at it. So that's why I'm just going to time lapse the rest of Windows 2 and you can see the end result. Now the first thing I did notice when I booted up Windows 2 is that it was all in Russian, so I presume this version was made specifically for the Soviet Union because Windows 2 is quite old in terms of operating systems, but otherwise some of the apps did work and I would call that a success. Now in terms of installation, Windows 3.1 was not really that much different. The only real difference I had to do was I had to install a CD-ROM because I didn't install Windows 3.1 on a virtual floppy image, I installed it with a virtual disk image. But I will have to say, the installation was a lot nicer because once I did it, there was a nice GUI that I could do to set up everything. And once that was finished, I basically just installed some sound drivers and got the sound working. Now in terms of installing MS-DOS for Windows 98, wasn't much different, but the Windows 98 install itself was actually a lot different because with all the previous Windows installs there was literally just like a few options that you could do, not really much, but with Windows 98 there was a whole plethora of things that you could pick and choose, which was nice at the time, but now we have a lot more options on our Windows installs like Windows 11 and Windows 10, but still was overall way different than Windows 1, 2, 3 and 3.1, and I also, for some reason, sounds worked immediately when I booted it up. So here I was checking around different Windows files to see if anything was awry, but I also tried to see if I can install MSN. I couldn't because I knew I'd never get internet on this thing. But otherwise nothing else was different than normal, and this is a way different install because this is the first ever Windows version with a start button. Pretty much this installation was exactly the same as Windows 95 except for the little side menu that showed all the stuff that it was doing, otherwise not much different. But somehow sound drivers worked immediately on startup, which was quite nice. When I booted up Windows 98, it also showed the Windows 98 welcome screen, which is a lot better than the Windows 95 one, although it was noticeably slow compared to Windows 95. Windows 98 was actually more stable than Windows 95, but it was slower noticeably because it had graphics issues, but overall this was a clean installation. Now believe it or not, Windows Me actually took the longest to install out of all of them, but surprisingly the sound worked when I first booted it up, which is crazy considering this is Windows Me we're dealing with here. And now we are finally out of the 9X based Windows and we're moving on into Windows XP and good old NT. Ah yes, Windows XP. Where do I even begin with this? Well, I will say that the jump from Windows Me to Windows XP is like the jump from Windows 3.1 to Windows 95. It is just a fully fleshed out operating system, and its disk even has its own formatting system, so you don't have to worry about installing clunky old 1981 MS-DOS, which is nice because I do not want to have to deal with any more clunky 9X versions like Me, 98, 95, all of them. But now, I guess, I am finally into the NT space and I don't have to worry about doing this anymore. Then again, some NT operating systems will be slow to install because of the conversion from 9X to NT. Windows just got better in general, and so did computers, so they could take up extra storage. My computer is a beast, but it still will take a little bit slower because of how we improved the operating systems over time. Now, we all know and love Windows Vista. It's not like it's one of the most hated operating systems of all time, but eventually after a few service packs it did get better. But wow, Microsoft really messed up with that one. So I'm not actually going to install Windows Vista. I'm going to get my friend to do it. Hello. Do you have any idea what Windows Vista is?
What's that?
Yeah, he doesn't know. He's going to have such a fun time doing it. Now, I will time-lapse it because I don't think you guys want to hear me explain all the technical stuff to Fionn, which is not really that technical because it's literally just Windows Vista. But let's hope he can do it.
Alright, now get out with this chair, man. Get out with this chair. Okay. Let me record this one. Oh, I mean, whatever. Let me download this Windows whatever thing is.
Yeah, this guy does not know what he's going to be getting himself into. Now, Fionn did take a really long time to install Windows Vista, so I had to speed it up to 55 to get it to go a little bit faster. And also the installation time took a bit of time, obviously. But the strange thing is, Windows Vista sound drivers did work, obviously, because the newer sound drivers, but it was very, very glitchy when I first started it up. Now, obviously, Windows Vista was picked up very, very badly by the public because of how considerably horrible it was, because people had old machines and they weren't told to upgrade it. They just were told, Windows Vista is the new operating system that can help speed up your computer, not slow it down. But eventually, after a couple of service packs, Microsoft did fix it, and it got way, way better, but it was overshadowed by the far superior Windows 7. Now, since I don't have access to Windows 8 or 8.1, I shall be installing Windows 7 and 10. And in my opinion, 7 and 10 are superior to Windows 8 and 8.1 unless you're using a tablet, then you kind of have to use 8 or 8.1. Now, the Windows 7 installation was extremely similar to the Windows Vista installation. So that's why I didn't really have any trouble with it, because Windows Vista was not really any trouble. But Windows 7 was a faster install. This only took like a couple of minutes compared to Windows Vista, which took like 25 minutes to install. But overall, Windows 7 was quite the same, but a little bit more fleshed out and smoothened than Windows Vista. Windows Vista was a bit clunkier, but Windows 7 was a bit smoother. Now, for some reason, Windows 10 was actually a little bit faster as an install than Windows 7, which is quite weird considering Windows 10 has a lot more files and a lot more GUI upgrades and a lot more quality of life upgrades than Windows 7. But as per usual, uninstall, it asked me loads of questions about sharing your data with advertisers, which is annoying, but overall it was a smoother install than Windows 7. Now, since I don't actually have a copy of Windows 11 and it would take way too long on my internet connection, I'm going to leave this video here, guys. That is a lot of versions that I installed. I installed Windows 1 to 3.1, 95, 98, Windows Me, XP, Vista 7 and 10. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I shall see you in the next one. Bye bye.